In 2006, an Italian doctor named Luciano Bernardi sat down to study music. He was professor of internal medicine, an amateur musician on the side, and he wanted to know what different kinds of music do to the human body. So he wired up volunteers, played them 6 styles of music, everything from slow raga to fast techno, and watched what happened to their heart rate, their blood pressure, and their breathing. Now, between the tracks, he placed a little 2-minute pause of silence. Nothing fancy, the pauses were only there to reset everyone back to a neutral baseline before the next song. It was a control. That's supposed to be the boring part of the experiment. But the boring part is where everything happened. When the silence hit, his volunteers didn't just return to baseline, they actually dropped below it. Their heart rate slowed, their blood pressure fell, and they relaxed more deeply in those empty 2-minute gaps than during the most gentle, most soothing music he could find. The control condition had hijacked the entire study. Bernardi did the only honest thing a scientist can do. He threw out his original premise and followed the numbers. And the paper he published that year became the single most downloaded article in Heart, a journal read by cardiologists. The takeaway has almost nothing to do with music. It was that silence, the thing he treated as a filler, might be one of the most powerful things you can give a stressed out heart. This is a pattern worth watching because again and again, researchers who set out to study sound ended up finding silence had an even more powerful effect. Let's start with the body. Now, let's think about what noise actually is. A sound wave hits your eardrum, rattles 3 tiny bones in your middle ear, and activates the spiral organ called the cochlea. It's lined with microscopic hair cells. Now, those cells turn vibration into electrical signals, and some of them go straight to the amygdala, the part of the brain that handles threat. So if there's a loud sound or unwanted sound like noise, it makes your heart work harder. You might sweat, and your body releases cortisol and adrenaline. Once in a while, that's fine. That's the system doing its job. The problem is chronic exposure, the constant low hum of traffic and notifications and HVAC units, which keep those stress chemicals trickling around the clock and slowly wear out the cells lining your blood vessels. That is exactly why Bernardi's pauses mattered so much. In silence, your heart rate settles, your blood pressure falls down, and you breathe slowly without trying. I spoke to Bernardi, and he went as far as to suggest that silence might one day be useful in managing cardiovascular disease, a sort of prescription you can't fill at a pharmacy, only in a quiet room. So silence calms the body, and yeah, that might feel intuitive, but the next finding is all about the mind, and it gets quite strange. In a 2021 experiment, people did demanding mental tasks under 3 conditions. One group worked with speech in the background, one with noise, and the other one in silence. The silent group came out ahead on nearly every measure: better accuracy, stronger memory, and a lower sense of mental effort. Then researchers checked their stress hormones, and the silent workers also had the lowest cortisol of the 3. Now, there's a clue here about what might be going on. Brain scientists have a name for the network that lights up when you aren't focused on anything in particular. They call it the default mode network. It's the daydreaming network, the one humming away while you stare out a train window and your mind drifts to the thing you said last week, and it does real work. It's tied to creativity, to self-reflection, to imagining the future, and stitching together your sense of who you are. The thing is, when researchers played loud noise at people inside a brain scanner, the default mode network got suppressed. The noise pushed aside the very part of the brain responsible for your inner thinking. So the silence around you really becomes a condition that lets the music inside you finally come through. Now, if silence Is this active inside the brain? Can it change the brain? Around 2013, a researcher named Imke Kirste was running a study at Duke, and she wasn't trying to study silence either. She and her team put mice in chambers and exposed them to different sounds for 2 hours a day. Mouse crying calls, white noise, and Mozart, and also ordinary background noise. Now, they were hypothesizing that the mouse crying calls would jolt the brain because they were signaling something urgent. Silence was the control, the nothing condition, kind of the same setup as before, and the results ran backward from the hypothesis. In the short term, several of the sounds nudged the brain into making new cells in the hippocampus, the region that runs memory, learning, and emotion. But a week later, when the team checked which of those new cells had actually survived and matured into real neurons, only one condition was still standing: silence. They found that 2 hours a day of quiet produced the largest, most durable growth of new neurons of anything they tested. The mice in silence ended up with measurably more new brain cells than the ones who heard mice cries or Mozarts or everyday noise. So why would nothing, silence, grow the brain? Well, the researchers' best guess is that for a mouse, total silence almost never happens in the wild. It's deeply unnatural. So the brain reads that sudden quiet as a kind of stress, a good kind, what scientists call eustress. So the brain tries to listen, and it builds new cells as if preparing for something it needs to notice. What's interesting is that when people are placed in silence and told to listen, brain imaging shows that their auditory cortex switches on anyway. They're trying to hear something. Scientists call it the sound of silence. So your brain refuses to just sit idle. It works in the quiet. Now, the neuron growth study was in mice. We don't have that proof in people yet. But in silence, we've seen a calmer heart, a sharper mind, and at least in mice, a bigger brain. But there's one more place silence comes up, and this is the one you can use tomorrow. Now, imagine a negotiation like talking about your salary, a deal, or an argument with your partner about where to go on vacation. The other person says something and you feel that pressure to respond right away because silence feels like weakness or awkward or like dropping the thread. But researchers at MIT studied exactly this. They recorded real negotiations and tracked the silent pauses, the moments where someone simply stopped and said nothing for at least 3 seconds. The thing is, those pauses turned out to be huge advantages. Silence tended to show up right before the breakthroughs, the moments where the deal got better for both sides. The why is pretty interesting. When we negotiate, our default setting is what they call the fixed pie thinking, the belief that there's one pie and your slice can only grow if mine shrinks. It's pure win-lose, tit for tat. So a few seconds of silence seems to knock people out of that reflex into a slower, more deliberate mode of thought, where you start hunting for ways to grow the pie instead of fighting over it. So quiet opens a gap where a better idea or opportunity can land. And it happens in the classroom as well. Teachers who wait 3 to 5 seconds after asking a question rather than rushing to fill the air, they tend to get richer and more thoughtful answers from the students. And therapists use silence on purpose because the pause is often where the real thing finally gets said. So the next time you feel the urge to say something or jump in, hold the quiet for 3 seconds and let yourself actually think. Sometime around 1951, the composer John Cage visited an anechoic chamber at Harvard. It's a room engineered to absorb every echo. It's built to be as close as perfectly silent as humans can manage. He stepped inside expecting pure void, but instead he heard 2 sounds. There was one high one and one low one. He was confused, so he asked the engineer what was wrong with the room. Nothing was wrong, the engineer told him. The high sound was Cage's own nervous system. The low sound was his own blood moving through his veins. Cage walked out and said, "Until I die, there will be sounds." Perfect silence does not exist. You won't find it in that chamber, maybe only in outer space. Because as long as you're alive to listen, your own body is humming underneath everything. And somehow that makes the whole pursuit feel less like chasing emptiness and more like just tuning in. I talked to neuroscientist Robert Sattore, who studies how the brain handles sound. He argues that psychologically, there may be no such thing as silence at all. Because even if the room goes totally quiet, the brain keeps producing sound of its own. I can guarantee you felt this. A song ends or someone hits pause and you can still hear it playing in your head, note for note. Your brain fills a gap. And as far as we know, that ability is uniquely human. And Sattore points to it as the engine of creativity. It's what lets a composer write a symphony with no instrument in the room. It's what lets you rehearse a conversation, plan a trip, or even replay a memory. So what we're really after is not total silence, something a little more narrow, the absence of noise. The layer underneath the traffic and the clings and the inner chatter where the true signal comes through. Your heartbeat, a thought, or the idea that's been waiting for a gap to arrive. You don't need a monastery or a silent retreat. The research points to something far smaller. Roughly 2 hours of accumulated quiet across a day seems to be where the effects show up. And you can stack that in pieces. Just begin your morning without screens, even for the first 10 minutes, before the noise of the day comes rushing in. And take a walk without your earbuds and let your default mode network do its thing. And when you can, leave a small gap of silence between tasks. Instead of putting a podcast or music, just let yourself be. And also you can try this, just sit and listen to one single piece of music all the way through, but doing nothing else, just absorbing it. Then do the same thing with silence. Listen to it the way you would listen to a song and notice what comes up. Because the people who study this keep arriving at the same conclusion that the poet Rumi reached 800 years ago. Listen to the silence. It has much to say. As a biologist and health journalist, I've spent a lot of time thinking about life, how the body works, what keeps us going, how fragile and incredible the whole thing is. And the more I learned about life, the more I wondered, what happens when it ends? I'm Akai, and I host a new documentary called Final Hours. This film is all about answering that question. I went looking for answers the way I was trained to, science first, then philosophy. Both gave me a lot, but neither gave me everything. So, I wanted to make a film that doesn't choose. Final Hours is both science and philosophy. It's data and storytelling. It's contemplation and beauty. At the center of it are people who, by every definition, were dead. But then they came back, something called a near-death experience, something that is unexplainable, but as I found out, holds answers to our deepest questions. So I sat with them and I listened. I didn't shy away from the uncomfortable questions, and they didn't shy away from the answers. And after long travels and even longer conversations, I'm honestly not the same person I was when I started filming. Why? Well, the things these people shared with me have made me think more carefully about how I spend my time and how I treat other people. The implications of what these people experienced on the other side are profound, and they're profound for all of us, including you. It doesn't matter what background you have, where you live, or what you believe. I promise you, you will find something in this film that speaks to you. And I really hope you'll watch with curiosity, holding in your mind the questions humans have been asking forever. What is this life actually for? And what waits on the other side? Don't be afraid to ask the big questions. Watch Final Hours. The full documentary is linked below.
We collided at very high speeds.
What happens after death?
There was really no way that you could muster a dream or hallucination out of that brain.
As the surgical team kind of gets ready to operate on me, that energy in the room shifted.
The next thing I knew,
I had left my body.
I looked up behind the surgeons, and there were these huge light beams.
It's a place that was very kind of primitive, coarse. It was like being underground in dirty jello. I cried out, God, help me.
In the flash of just a second.
It was a world of perfection.
I was shuttled into this life review.
I saw this vision of what I was meant to do.
He says, I know that you died full of this regret. I'm here to offer you that second chance. But if I give you this offer, you have to make sure that the next time you die, you're ready for it.
I heard my dad say to me, now that you know the truth, go back and live your life fearlessly.